In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Before I get into today's review, I would like to thank Interweb Kaiju. He recently put out a video doing quick reviews of all 5 of the Phantasm movies, and he very kindly asked if he could use my rendition of the Phantasm theme in the video. Of course, I said yes, and I'm honored that he ended up using it. I will be linking that video down below if you're not subscribed to him already. He's a really cool, really laid-back guy who really knows his monster movies and horror. Today, I am reviewing Ghoulies. This movie came out in 1985. It was directed by Luca Bercovici. This was his directing debut, and he's done a lot of jobs on a lot of movies, but in terms of directing, he also directed movies like Rockula, Dark Tide, and The Granny. This movie stars Peter Liapis, I don't know how to pronounce it, but he also returned for Ghoulies 4 and was in Wishmaster, Ghost Warrior, and Alone with a Stranger. Lisa Pelican, who was in Lionheart, Jennifer, and 1,000 Days. Michael DeBarris, who is in Night Flyers, Waxwork 2, I, Monster with Christopher Lee, and had a recurring role on MacGyver, and Mariska Hargitay, who was in Lake Placid, Tales from Earthsea, Night Sin, and Law and Order. This is a Charles Band production, obviously known for Full Moon and things like Puppet Master and Subspecies, and movies like Reanimator and Tourist Trap, and of course, this movie. This film follows a boy named Jonathan Graves, whose father was an evil cultist who tried to sacrifice him but failed, and the boy was rescued by a benevolent magic user named Wolfgang. Years later, he has a girlfriend named Rebecca and is trying to live a normal young adult life, but he's also trying to figure out who his parents were and is drawn into this world of magic that surrounds him in this mansion that he lives in, and ends up performing these dark rituals to try and figure out what kind of connection they have to his parents, and ends up summoning little demons, I guess called Ghoulies, although they don't really give them a name in the film. He tries to balance this exploration of dark magic with this normal life and this relationship he's trying to have with Rebecca, but ends up causing chaos in his own life and the lives of the people around him, due in no small part to the Ghoulies. So the score of this film was composed by 2 people, being Richard Band, who is obviously related to Charles Band. I've talked about him before. He scored Mutant, which I've reviewed, as well as Full Moon / Charles Band productions like Reanimator and Puppet Master. And this was also scored by Shirley Walker, who had a really strong track record of film score work. She composed the music for the Crispin Glover remake of Willard, as well as Black Xmas, the first remake of Black Christmas, and the Final Destination movies, as well as working as conductor and or orchestrator for lots of other composers, most notably, at least in my eyes, Danny Elfman and Hans Zimmer. She even helped, if the internet is to be believed, co-write some of the music for Batman with Danny Elfman. That combination of Richard Band and Shirley Walker creates this score that is very orchestral, lush, and whimsical. It was a big departure listening to this score compared to the very synth-heavy scores of most of the other movies I've been reviewing recently. It has a very Danny Elfman-esque style to it, which again is unsurprising considering that Shirley Walker did a lot of work with Danny Elfman, and you can obviously hear Richard Band's influence in there as well with that kind of campy, dark whimsy he brought to the scores of movies like Reanimator, even though Reanimator's score sounds a lot like Psycho. Honestly, too much like Psycho. Why does the score for Reanimator sound like Psycho? There is also a little bit of synthiness and 80s pop for the first party scene that takes place in this. Jonathan and Rebecca invite some friends over and they have a big crazy party in this old mansion, and there's a lot more of an 80s synth and 80s pop sound to the music in that scene, which was fitting. If they had brought those elements into other scenes, it probably would have bothered me. So I'm glad that they ended up just using the synth music in that one scene and keeping the rest of the score with that kind of dark, whimsical, fanciful, orchestral style. I also absolutely love the look of this movie. The look of both the inside and the outside of the mansion is beautiful. It's the only location in the film. I believe the film was actually written to be a one-location movie, most likely for budgetary reasons. From the lighting to just the production design, the look of the mansion, both on the inside and out, is just gorgeous and downright gothic. It looks like something out of a Hammer film, almost. It doesn't quite tip into that level of awesome for me, but it's close. You've got the candelabras and the beautiful architecture, these beautiful cobwebs, and this kind of surreal, eerie, kind of Argento lighting, but not really. There's just this blue neon lighting to the basement culty area in the bottom of the house that I thought was beautiful. It's not art house gothic amazingness, but it is imitating the look of a bigger budget gothic dark fantasy thing and doing it really, really, really well. The outfits of the teenagers just look like 80s teenager stereotypes. There's also a scene later on in the film where they all have to wear sunglasses, and they all have these really wacky sunglasses. One of them has sunglasses with windshield wipers on them, which I thought was really fun. But other than that, the teen friend characters don't have particularly interesting costumes. I liked the look of the culty robes that the cultists in the kind of prologue beginning of the film with Jonathan's father Malcolm Graves had, and the robes that Jonathan wore in the movie. They're not anything too fancy, but they add to the dark fantasy look of the film. The characters in this are not nuanced at all, really, but most of them are likable or at least compelling. The dialogue written for them is not great. It's very cliche and by the numbers. I can't really bring to mind any kind of memorable quotes from the film, but the actors managed to sell the dialogue and make it sound natural to some extent coming out of these characters' mouths. That said, the acting style in this is not naturalistic at all. There's definitely a cheesiness and a stylization to it. What I'm saying is the dialogue doesn't sound forced coming out of these characters' mouths. They managed to make it sound natural within the context of the film. I especially liked Jonathan and Rebecca. I thought they were acted really well in spite of the by-the-numbers dialogue. They were very likable characters. The teen friends definitely had little quirks that distinguished them from one another. There's one that's kind of the sex-obsessed womanizer. There's two goofy friends who are the stoners. There's a character who I think is called Frog Boy. I don't really know what his thing is, but apparently he does like this little weird high-pitched voice thing, which I guess is why he's called that. He only does it once in the film, but he was just weird. The female characters that come along with those male characters don't have distinguishing characteristics to them at all. I can't really remember anything about them, which is not great. It's kind of disappointing. And even with those kind of goofy side characters having distinguishing traits about them, they're not especially compelling, but all of them are decently acted. And Malcolm Graves is played as this very dastardly, over-the-top evil sorcerer in a really fun way that I liked. The Ghoulies as characters are distinguishable because because of the different designs of the different ghoulies. They don't have super distinctive personalities, but considering that they're puppets that aren't the most articulate in the world, they do have a lot of personality, all things considered. They were just really cute to me. They definitely managed to bring that playful aspect into them. There was one scene in particular that I liked. It was this really tiny moment, but one of the ghoulies is banging away on either a piano or a harpsichord and just singing this random tuneless song. Just little playful things like that added a little bit of personality and fun to the ghoulies that wasn't much, but I liked it. There's also, I guess this counts as a character, it's barely in the film, but there is a random clown puppet sitting in one of the rooms in the house. When Jonathan does this ritual and summons the ghoulies, this clown puppet in the house comes to life. It's not on the level of the toy clown in Poltergeist, but the design of the clown is creepier in some ways, and it is still a very, very creepy clown, and you're like, please, please don't come to life. Although something later on does happen with the clown where it kind of changes a little bit. I don't want to give too much away, but that kind of defeated the creepy effect a little bit for me, and I was like, what are they trying to do here? But still, creepy clown. I wasn't terribly on board with the plot of this film at first, but as it progressed, I got more and more into it and ended up really liking it for what it was. At first, it's just like they're having this party. They're like deciding what to do as a fun party game, and Jonathan just out of the blue is like, let's have a ritual, and they're like, yeah, okay. And obviously it's like the goofy teen having a ritual in a really bad place to have a ritual routine. You see the same thing in movies like Night of the Demons, and every time a teenager uses a Ouija board when they probably shouldn't in some paranormal film. I kind of rolled my eyes at that, but it still made sense in the context of the film. I was kind of wondering, how does Jonathan know how to do all this stuff? Because you haven't really set him up as this scholar of the dark arts, but they kind of give you this inkling that he has learned how to do all of this dark magic instinctively because that knowledge has been passed down genetically from his parents. It's not the greatest explanation, but it works. I was confused about his motivation at first. I knew how he knew how to do the magic, but I didn't really know why. But at one point he says, I think this has something to do with my parents. It's kind of been set up that he doesn't really know who his parents were, so he's using the magic to try to figure out who his parents were and why they were into all this stuff. And obviously he's not gonna like what he finds out when he figures out that his dad was this evil cultist named Malcolm Graves who tried to sacrifice him when he was a baby, but you can definitely understand why he wants to know who his parents are, and it brings this pathos to his character rather than him just screwing around with a bunch of black magic for no reason and trying to hide it from Rebecca. It helps you to kind of feel torn with him between this exploration of dark magic and trying to have a normal life with Rebecca. And obviously you want him to have the normal life, but you understand why he's being drawn towards the darkness. The kind of tension that's created by him trying to balance those two things leads to some great drama between him and Rebecca. It leads him into this downward spiral where he's becoming more corrupted and he's trying to use the powers to get the things that he wants. So he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, so to speak. You know that it's not gonna work for him, but again, you understand why he's doing it. There is some voiceover that they use to try to move the plot forward by the character of Wolfgang. There's two tiny instances of it during the earlier portions of the film, and I really felt that they were unnecessary. He was just like, and so I took the young boy in and raised him as my own. That helped a little bit, but then there's another point where they're about to do the first ritual and it's like, and thus they were about to go down the darker path that would change their lives forever, and it's like, we know that already. We don't need this narration. It feels clunky and forced. There was kind of a cheesy charm to it, but it really wasn't needed. That said, Wolfgang's barely in this movie. He only pops up a few times, and yet he's made out to be this really important character. He needed to be in the film a lot more. There is a later ritual scene in the film which I thought was hysterically funny. You've got Jonathan chanting and then everyone repeating everything back to him, and it just gets more and more and more intense, and then the Ghoulies start chanting with him and trying to say the words and kind of garbling them a little bit, and it's kind of adorable. And then all of them at the big climax of the ritual just all start screaming in unison at the top of their lungs, and it is the funniest thing in the world to me. And the ultimate climax scene of this film, I'm not gonna spoil it for you, this is a spoiler-free review, but while it was kind of fun and cool, it felt very much like a forced Deus Ex Machina thing, where another character swoops in and saves the day, and it doesn't really let Jonathan redeem himself from the dark path he's gone down. And obviously, this is a Charles Band production. It was made to make money. It's not an art film that's got all these important messages and really elaborately done character arcs, but I liked what they had set up with Jonathan, and I thought they didn't follow through with that, and I kind of wish they had. But the climax was still fun. It didn't bother me that much, but if they had followed through with it, I would have liked this movie even more. And the effects in this movie are cheesy, and like I've been saying with all of these films, they have that cheesiness and artifice that comes by proxy of being a low-budget 80s horror film, but they are especially charming in this film to me for some reason. I liked the look of the hand-drawn visual effects. There's a lot of glowing and lightning and just magic powers that happen in this film that I thought were obviously hand-drawn, but there was definitely care put into them, and there was something very charming about the look of them. And the Ghoulies are clearly puppets, and they aren't super articulate puppets, but they still have a bit of a personality to them, as I mentioned, and all of the different Ghoulies or different types of Ghoulies have distinctive looks to them. There is a glowing green eyes effect that happens when both Malcolm Graves and Jonathan Graves are kind of corrupted by the dark power and in evil dark sorcerer mode that I thought looked pretty cool, but at the same time, the pupils weren't always looking the same direction or looking the right way, and it looked a little bit goofy to me. It kind of added to the manic inhuman feel a little bit, but I don't think that was intentional. It bothered me a bit. The effects in the kill/scare sequences in this, it's not really clear whether they're kill sequences or not, but regardless, the effects in those scenes were really, really fun. This movie is not a gore fest. It's clearly going for a more family-friendly young adults audience, but it's still dark and has some sexual themes in it. The tongue scene in particular was a highlight for me. If you've seen the movie, you have to know exactly what I'm talking about. That scene is so cartoonish and ridiculous and out of nowhere, and I absolutely love it. Overall, I went into this movie with really low expectations and very little sense of what I was getting myself into. I had seen the poster for Ghoulies with the one Ghoulie coming out of the toilet, so I honestly thought this was going to be something along the lines of Bud the Chud in terms of quality, to be honest. I thought this was going to be a movie about toilet-dwelling monsters that was this subpar ripoff of Gremlins in some way, and it's not that at all, really. It's definitely trying to cater to that same audience of kind of family-friendly horror in terms of the tone of movies like Beetlejuice and Gremlins, and even dark fantasy movies like The Dark Crystal or Labyrinth, even though those movies probably came out after this film. Gremlins didn't. Gremlins came out before, and this movie was kind of dismissed as a really shoddy Gremlins ripoff by the critics, and still is to some extent, but I think that is doing the film a disservice because both films were in production at the same time, and the only reasons Gremlins came out before is because Ghoulies ran into financial trouble and they had to scrounge up more money to finish the project before they could release it. It's not an amazing film. You can tell that it was mostly made for money, but the acting in it is really good, the story is decent, and the Ghoulies are adorable, and I love the dark fantasy element of the whole story and the overall production design. I don't think this movie is a must-see. There might be some people who disagree with me on that. I know this film has something of a cult following. I don't think this movie is going to change your life. I don't think it's a go out of your way to see it film, but if you do end up doing it, I think it will be worth your time because it is a really, really well put together film that will make for a really, really entertaining hour and 20 minutes. That is my review of Ghoulies. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!